Students, we've showed you how you can use Dude Guy to help you when you're doing integer multiplication. So you know when you multiply a negative times a positive, you cover up those two and you're left with a negative. And so y'all have used this strategy, but I want to show you another way that why this particular strategy works and why when you multiply a negative times a negative, you get a positive. And so let me show you an example. So if we look at 2 times 3, we have to know that 2 times 3 means two groups of 3. So that would be 3 and 3. But what do we actually do with those two groups of 3? We have to add those groups. So we do plus and plus. So if we have two groups of 3, we do 3 plus 3, which is going to equal 6. So 2 times 3 is 6. So we are going to add two groups of 3. Now, when a negative number gets involved, like 2 times negative 3, we're looking at the same thing. We're now going to add two groups of negative 3. So we're going to have a negative 3 and a negative 3, and we have to add those together. So negative 3 plus negative 3 is going to equal negative 6. And we knew with Dude Guy, when we have one positive and one negative, we're going to end up with a negative. So a negative 6 as our answer is correct. Now, that is all good when you start with a positive number because we're going to start with adding. But now what happens when we start with a negative number? Well, here we have negative 2 times 3. So we know that we're going to have two groups of 3. That can't change. We have the same structure in the problem. But because this is not a positive 2, we can't add those two groups together. So instead, we must subtract. And so when we subtract two groups of 3, it's going to be minus 3 and minus 3. Well, minus 3 and minus 3 is going to give us a minus 6 or a negative 6. And Dude Guy would confirm that a negative times a positive is a negative, so we know that we're on the right track. So now the last example, the one that seems to be the most difficult and challenging for us, is negative 2 times negative 3. We're still going to start with two groups, this time of negative 3. But instead of adding like we did on the slide before, because we start with a negative, we're going to subtract. And so our final expression, we're going to have the two groups of negative 3, but we're going to subtract them. So it's going to be a minus, 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 minus. Well, when you do minus a negative, that turns to a plus, plus. So this is actually 3 plus 3, or we get 6. And so Dude Guy shows two negatives multiplied together give us a positive. And if we think about this as subtracting a negative group, I think you're going to be a little bit better off as you look through these.